Good morning, Year 5. Today we're going to be continuing to use line graphs, and today we're going to use them to solve problems. So let's have a look at our first graph. So this shows us the overnight temperature, and it goes from, I would think, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Although that's not clear, it could have been made clearer. And then we've got our temperature down the side, so we can see it starts at 0. And it goes down to -2 and then down to -4, and then it goes up in 2, 4, 6, 8. So our intervals are of 2. Okay. So the first question asks us, what was the highest temperature, what was the lowest temperature, and what time did they occur? So let's start with the highest temperature. So I can see that the highest temperature is when the line is at the highest point, when the data line is at the highest point, because that's what my graph, that's what my y-axis is showing. So we can see here that it's in between 6 and 8. So the highest temperature could have been 7 degrees Celsius, or we don't know if it's Celsius, so I'm just going to put degrees, and it occurred at 10 p.m. Okay, and then the lowest, so I need to find the lowest point on the data line this time, which I can see is here. If I take my ruler, because it's a little bit unclear because of how far from the axis it is, if I take my ruler and draw over to the y-axis, I can see it's in between -2 and -4, so the lowest temperature would have been -3 degrees, and it occurred at 4 a.m. Okay, and then the next question said, what is the difference between the highest temperature, the highest and the lowest temperature? So because this is a minus number, we can't just subtract them quite as easily, but we've got a number line ready made for us here. So I can start at -3 and I can count up. So from -3 to -2 is 1. So I've got 1 degree. Then from between -2 and 0, I've got 2 degrees. Oh. Then I've got another 2 degrees from 0 to 2. Then another 2 from 2 to 4. Then another 2 from 4 to 6. And then from 6 to 7, I've got 1 degree. So we can then count those up. So I've got 2, add 1 is 3, add 2 is 5, add 2 is 7, add 2 is 9, add 1 is 10. So the difference between the highest and lowest temperature was 10 degrees, not -10 degrees, just 10 degrees. Okay, then the last one says, how long does the temperature stay at freezing point or less? So this is a little bit of science because we need to know that freezing point is 0 degrees. So our intervals in time are going up in 1 hour jumps. So we can just count how many times it was 0 or less. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if it's 6 data points below 0, we can say that it is 6 hours. So the temperature was freezing point or below for 6 hours. Full stop. Okay, so that is one way we can solve problems with a graph. Let's have a look at another one. Okay, so this one is heart rate during exercise. Along the bottom we've got time. We don't know if that's hours or minutes, but I would assume that it's minutes. And then we've got the pulse rate at the side, so that's how fast the person's heart rate is beating. The time is going up in intervals of 1, and the pulse rate is going up in intervals of 20. Okay, So let's have a look at the first question. So it says, how long did it take for the pulse rate to reach the highest level? Explain using the graph to help you. Okay, so first we need to identify the highest level, and that looks like it's about here. Okay, so if I take my ruler line and I go down from that point to find where it hits, and it hits 5. So it takes 5 minutes for the person's pulse rate to reach its peak, okay, to reach the highest level. So we can write, it took 5 minutes for the pulse rate to reach its highest level. And how do we know that? Well, we've looked for the highest data point on the y-axis, and then we went down the x-axis to find the time that it took to get there. Okay? And then it says, when do you think the person stopped exercising? Convince me. So I think the person might have stopped exercising around the 7-minute mark, because as you can see, it takes an incline, so his heart rate gets faster. Then he hits that point. I think he remains exercising for another further 2 minutes. And then at the 7-minute mark, that's when he stops because his heart rate begins to decrease. So, how would we write that? So, I think the person stopped exercising at 7 minutes because their heart rate begins to decline after remaining the same for 2 minutes. Okay, just like that. Okay, so let's have a look at a different type of graph you could see today. So this one is called bath time, and it shows you how long it took to fill a bath. It shows you the level of the bath water over the space of 22 minutes. So the time at the bottom is minutes, and it's going up in intervals of 1. And then up on the y-axis, we've got our intervals going up in 5s, and it's the height of the water in centimetres. So it says, how long did it take to fill the bath? Okay, so it took to fill the bath, probably, I think it took 8 minutes. So if I go to here, I think it took 8 minutes. Or just about 8.5 minutes, okay? Because something else seems to happen here, and we're going to think about that in a minute. So I think it takes 8 minutes. Okay, and how long did it take to empty? Well, I think it's going from 18 to 22. So I've got 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes this time. Okay, so you might be thinking, Miss Williams, but the lines continue to incline and decrease. But think about when you have a bath, when you get in, what happens to the water? The water level gets higher because you've moved the water around, okay? So this question says, what happened to the height of the water when it reached around 16 minutes? Well, it's almost like somebody's got in, because if you look at the slope of the line from 0 minutes to 8.5 minutes, we can see that it's quite a gradual line. It's not steep, it's slowly going up. However, at 8.5 minutes, the line becomes really steep, which tells me that it happened quickly, okay? It took less time to reach that point. So it's almost like somebody got into the bath and they stayed in the bath, and then they got out. So that's why I said that I thought it took 4 minutes. I thought it was 18 minutes because somebody had gotten out of the bath here as well. So at 16 centimeters, I think somebody got into the bath, increasing the height of the water. Okay, so it's almost like you've got to think about the story that's going on while the graph is happening. So this is almost like maybe somebody's putting their child in the bath, or they're having a bath at the end of the day or in the morning or something. Okay, so you need to think of the story that's behind it and thinking about the steepness of the lines and why it's so different. Okay, so that is what maths is today. It is using graphs to help us to solve problems. So if you are white rose, if you are doing silver, you are doing questions 1 and 2, gold questions 2 and 3, and platinum questions 3 and 4.